Following Supreme Court's lead, judge finds right to remove serial numbers from guns. So, for decades, federal law has forbidden gun owners from scratching out the serial number that manufacturers are legally required to place on firearms. The reason is obvious. These serial numbers help state and federal law enforcement trace guns. Well, I'm not going to go through the rest of this article. Feel free to look it up. An opinion by Mark Joseph Stern. It's just a really fantastic example of uh, people thinking they grasp an idea about guns and having not the slightest clue about them. Okay, so one of the first things, I'm going to jump out of this for a second, see if I can do this right. Okay, first it's a function of trying to understand where people who commit crimes get their guns from. Now, these are firearms possessed by state prison inmates at time of offense. Guy putting this together used two different dates. These facts and figures are assembled about every decade. The numbers don't change a whole lot, as this chart seems to indicate. So the big thing to take away to understand is that, so like purchase at a retail store, pawn shop, flea market, or gun show, and yes, gun show, when you purchase a weapon from there, they have to do a background check, and then the serial number of the gun is recorded, and they know who they sold the gun to. This is 11.3% of the time. So, most criminals don't buy their own guns, or at least they don't buy them from places that properly record them. 40% of them are illegal purchases, and this other 37% buying from a family or friend. It makes it very hard to track these, because just because they purchased it from a family member or friend doesn't mean that family member or friend was the original person who purchased the gun from a retail store, pawn shop, flea market, or gun show. Now, if you understand the general logic of that, so these are the guys who were caught generally with their guns. For the most part, guns don't trace you back to your guns don't. If you just find a gun that was potentially used in a crime, it doesn't particularly help you get back to the person who actually used it. So let's throw the browser up again for a second. Now, one of the fun things he did in this article is he made a link to, he said, these serial numbers help state and federal law enforcement trace guns. And then he throws this article in as a source. So here is, I'll read a few blurbs from it to just give you an idea. So when a New Orleans police officer recovers a gun on the street, one of the first questions asked is, how did the weapon end up in the hands of the criminal? The answer more often than not is, it was stolen. To confirm, detectives entered the weapon's serial number into an FBI database, which will provide details on who reported it stolen, when and where, gives investigators leads. Sometimes that can potentially help track down the firearm source. But what if the gun wasn't reported stolen? Last year, New Orleans Police Department and the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's County Office sorry, parish sheriff's office. They don't have counties there. It's just a reflex. Combined to remove more than 2,300 illegal guns off the streets. Of those weapons, 850 had been reported stolen based on an average statistic of over the past years. That leaves a source of 1,450 weapons unaccounted for. Law enforcement officials describe these guns as entering a virtual black hole of information where it can be nearly impossible to track them to their origin. Often, weapons change hands multiple times to the point where no one can be certain where they came from. Quote, it convolutes the process so much that the end user is like, y'all can never figure out how I ended up with this gun. Good luck. Uh, this is from a police officer from New Orleans speaking on the condition of anonymity. You get guns with these histories, and it's literally impossible to figure out where they came from. Okay, so general gist of what we're talking about is that only a small number of these weapons are actually purchased by the person from a source that actually links the number back to them. Uh, Around 11%. The overwhelming bulk of the guns actually end up going through multiple sources, which may or may not be able to lead the gun back to the criminal. Uh, but so the most important thing to understand, and this is really the part that's critical, is the number of crimes that are stopped by having a serial number on a gun. Probably about zero. Okay, the serial number doesn't prevent somebody from using it in a crime. Now, uh, to a certain extent, criminals will avoid deliberately removing the serial number from a gun because it is illegal, and they could face longer time in prison over it. Uh, but uh, it doesn't change the crime statistic dramatically because uh, if these guys were truly afraid of crime, if they're going to be committing a gun and using a gun to commit a robbery or a murder, uh, how afraid are they of violating the serial number law? Serial numbers, and this is also to understand, serial numbers uh, as a uniform uh, stamping only came into effect with the 1968 Gun Control Act. So guns before that um, don't have to have serial numbers, or they don't have to have serial numbers that particularly are easily trackable. Also, any gun sold before 1968 that never re-enters, uh, like for instance, if somebody bought a gun before 1968 and they have it, or they sell it to somebody else, or they pass it along to another family member, that gun's never appeared on a register anywhere. So there's a lot of guns that were made before 1968. And there's also a lot of other firearms that don't have serial numbers on them at all. For example, black powder weapons, which are just as deadly as a regular weapon, don't have serial numbers on them at all. So the serial number thing is kind of a ruse. So essentially, what the author here is trying to do is he's trying to horrify you at just the total disintegration of common sense around how gun control is being dismantled by the court system due to the Supreme Court ruling, when in fact the serial numbers do virtually nothing to help apprehend criminals, and at the same time do nothing to stop crime. So, what do you think when it comes to serial numbers on a gun. Can you come up with a plausible reason for why serial numbers actually do work? If you think so, please comment below. Tell me how they work. And if you have examples that back me up on this, feel free to throw them in the comments as well. Interested to hear what you have to say. If you liked my video, please smash the like button. If there's somebody out there you think might find this interesting, please share it with them. And if you like this content, and I'm not a full-blown gunny, I have multiple different topics I'm talking on. So look to see what my other things are. You see, it's a kind of an eclectic range of things. If you like the content I'm making, consider subscribing. I usually put these out a handful of times a week. This week a little bit more often than others. All right, well, I appreciate you spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.